The hunt begins. The crimson sun of Kethvar cast long shadows across the crystalline arena as thousands of alien spectators filled the amphitheater. Their excited chittering and growling created a symphony of anticipation that echoed off the translucent walls. In the center of the massive structure, a track stretched for exactly 1 Earth mile, its surface embedded with sensors that could measure speed down to the microsecond. Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony Council adjusted his ornate ceremonial robes and stepped forward to the central platform. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as his voice boomed through the arena's amplification system. "Citizens of the galaxy, today we witness something unprecedented in our civilization's history. For the first time, a human child has requested to participate in the sacred hunt of Kethvar." The crowd's reaction was immediate and explosive. Some species erupted in laughter, their multiple mouths producing sounds that ranged from musical trills to harsh barks. Others hissed in what could only be described as indignation. The Zephyrians, tall blue beings with elongated limbs, swayed back and forth in what their species considered the equivalent of rolling their eyes. "A human child!" screeched Kalax, the reptilian council member, his forked tongue flicking out in disgust. "These soft pink creatures can barely outrun their own domesticated animals. This is an insult to our most sacred tradition." In the preparation chambers beneath the arena, 18-year-old Maya Chen sat calmly on a simple metal bench, methodically stretching her legs. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore nothing more elaborate than standard Earth athletic gear, lightweight running shoes, compression shorts, and a moisture-wicking shirt. The simplicity of her appearance stood in stark contrast to the elaborate bio-enhancement suits and ceremonial gear that typically adorned participants in the hunt. "Miss Chen," came a tinny voice through the chamber's communication system. It belonged to Dr. Thexini, the arena's chief medical examiner. "I must inform you once more of the risks involved in this competition. The Velkari hunting beast you will face has never been outrun by any sentient being in the 300 years of this tradition. Its top speed has been measured at 73.6 miles per hour, and it can maintain that pace for over 30 minutes. Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed?" Maya looked up at the camera in the corner of the room and smiled. It was a quiet, confident smile that somehow seemed out of place given the circumstances. "I'm certain, Doctor. This is something I need to do." "But why?" Dr. Thexini's confusion was evident even through the artificial translation. "Your species has nothing to prove to us. Earth has been welcomed into the galactic community. You have trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific partnerships. What could possibly motivate you to risk your life in such a manner?" Maya stood and began a series of dynamic warm-up exercises, her movements fluid and precise. "3 months ago, your people visited our Olympic training center. I watched as your observers dismissed every human athletic achievement as quaint and limited by biological constraints. They laughed when they saw our sprint records, calling them adorably slow. When they learned about our marathon runners, they suggested we might be better suited for endurance meditation than actual physical competition." She paused in her stretching and looked directly at the camera again. "But what really bothered me was when they saw our children's races. Your observer, Ambassador Krelon, said that human children moved like wounded prey animals, and that it was almost sad to watch such limited creatures attempt to run. That's when I knew I had to be here." The communication system crackled with what might have been a sigh. "Miss Chen, I have reviewed your planetary records. While impressive for a human, your fastest recorded time would not even qualify you for our youth competitions. The 1-mile distance you'll be covering has been completed by our fastest Velkari in under 47 seconds. "I know the records, Doctor," Maya replied, beginning a series of high knees that gradually increased in speed. "I've studied every hunt that's been recorded for the past 50 years. I know that no sentient being has ever beaten a Velkari in a straight sprint. I know that most species don't even try anymore because the outcome is considered predetermined. Above in the arena, the crowd was growing restless. The delay was unusual, and speculation ran wild through the stands. Some aliens had brought what could only be described as the galactic equivalent of popcorn, certain they were about to witness the shortest hunt in history. Others placed bets on how quickly the human would surrender once she saw the size of her opponent. "Attention, spectators," Ambassador Veltar announced. "The human participant has confirmed her intention to proceed. We will now present the Velkari." A massive gate at the far end of the arena began to rise with a mechanical rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the structure. What emerged from the darkness beyond made even the most jaded spectators fall silent. The Velkari was a creature that seemed designed by evolution specifically for killing in motion. Standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, its body was a perfect fusion of feline grace and reptilian power. Its hide was a deep black that seemed to absorb light, covered in scales that overlapped like armor plating. 6 legs, each ending in retractable claws the size of daggers, carried its massive frame with an unsettling silence. Its head was elongated and predatory, with eyes that glowed like amber coals and a mouth full of teeth that could tear through most known materials. But it was the way the creature moved that truly inspired fear. Despite its size and obvious weight, the Velkari flowed across the arena floor like liquid shadow. Every step was perfectly placed, every movement economical and deadly. This was not just a fast animal. This was a perfectly evolved killing machine that happened to be incredibly fast. The crowd's silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into renewed excitement. This was what they had come to see. This was the apex predator that had made the hunt of Kethvar legendary across the galaxy. In her preparation chamber, Maya heard the crowd's reaction and smiled again. She had watched hours of footage of these creatures, studying their movement patterns, their hunting strategies, their strengths and weaknesses. More importantly, she had discovered something in that footage that no one else seemed to have noticed. "Dr. Thexini," she said, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. "I have one question before we begin. In all the hunts you've recorded, how many times has the Velkari been pushed to its absolute maximum speed for the entire race distance?" There was a pause before the response came. That's an interesting question, Miss Chen. Looking at our data, I would say never. Most participants either surrender before the race begins or are caught within the first quarter mile. The Velkari has never needed to maintain top speed for a full mile. Maya nodded, unsurprised by this answer. "That's what I thought. Doctor, there's something about human physiology that I don't think your people fully understand. We're not the fastest species, and we're not the strongest. But we have one ability that seems to be unique among intelligent life forms." "And what would that be?" "Persistence," Maya said simply. "Humans are persistence hunters, Doctor. On our world, we didn't evolve to outrun our prey in a sprint. We evolved to run them down over time, to chase them until they collapsed from exhaustion. Our entire cardiovascular system, our cooling mechanisms, our muscle fiber composition, everything about us is designed for one thing. We just don't stop." The arena's announcement system crackled to life. "Participants to the starting line. The hunt of Kethvar will begin in 60 seconds. Maya stood and walked toward the chamber door. As it began to open, letting in the sounds of the crowd and the alien atmosphere of Kethvar, she took one last deep breath of recycled air. "Miss Chen," came Dr. Thexini's voice one final time. "Whatever happens out there, good luck." "Thank you, Doctor," Maya replied, stepping into the corridor that would lead her to the arena floor. "But I don't think I'm going to need luck today." As she emerged into the arena proper, the noise hit her like a physical force. Thousands of alien voices created a cacophony that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She could see species she had only read about in textbooks, creatures that defied easy description, beings whose very existence expanded her understanding of what life could become. But her focus quickly narrowed to the track ahead of her and the creature that waited at the opposite starting position. The Velkhari had noticed her emergence and was now staring directly at her with those burning amber eyes. Its tail, thick as a tree trunk and covered in spines, swished back and forth in what she recognized as barely contained hunting instinct. Maya walked to her starting position with measured steps, her breathing steady and controlled. The starting line was marked by a strip of luminescent material that would serve as the sensor for the race's beginning. She placed her feet in a standard sprinter's stance, though she knew the first few seconds would be nothing like a sprint. "Citizens of the galaxy," Ambassador Veltar's voice boomed across the arena. "Witness now the hunt of Kethvar. On one side we have Skartel, the reigning champion Velkhari, undefeated in 43 hunts. On the other, Maya Chen of Earth, the first human to ever attempt this sacred trial." The crowd's reaction was mixed, but intense. Maya could hear what sounded like cheering from some sections, though she suspected it was less support for her and more excitement at the prospect of watching something unprecedented, even if that something was her inevitable defeat. "The rules are simple," Veltar continued. "1 mile distance. First to cross the finish line wins. There are no other rules. Participants, prepare yourselves." Maya looked across the track at Skartel. The Velkhari was crouched low. Its powerful muscles coiled like springs. She could see the intelligence in its eyes, the calculating predator evaluating its prey. It knew exactly what this race meant, and it had no intention of allowing any creature to claim victory. She settled into her starting position, feeling the alien surface of the track beneath her fingers. The material was slightly springy, designed to accommodate the various anatomies and running styles of different species. For her purposes, it would work perfectly. 10 seconds, came the announcement. Maya closed her eyes and felt her heartbeat. Steady, strong, ready. 5 seconds. She opened her eyes and looked down the track. 1 mile had never seemed so long or so short at the same time. "Begin the hunt." The starting signal was a pulse of light that traveled down both sides of the track, followed immediately by a sound like thunder. Both participants exploded from their starting positions. Skartel's acceleration was like watching physics come to life. The creature went from motionless to a blur of black motion in less than a second, its 6 legs working in perfect coordination to drive it forward at a speed that seemed to defy the laws of momentum. Maya's start was different. She came out of the blocks fast, but not with the explosive power of her opponent. Instead, she settled quickly into a pace that looked almost casual by comparison. To the spectators, it appeared that she was already giving up, choosing to jog while her opponent sprinted toward certain victory. But Maya knew something that no one else in the arena understood. She had spent years studying not just the Velkhari, but the very nature of speed itself. She understood the difference between maximum velocity and optimal velocity, between sprinting and running, between going fast and going fast for a long time. As Skartel pulled ahead by 10 yards, then 20, then 30, the crowd began to murmur its disappointment. This was not the spectacle they had hoped for. The human was clearly outmatched, and the race would be over before it had truly begun. But Maya kept running at her steady pace, her form perfect, her breathing controlled. She watched Skartel's movement patterns, noting the slight changes in gait that indicated the creature was already working harder than it was used to. She had counted on this. She had counted on the Velkhari's instinct to establish dominance early, to demoralize its opponent with a show of overwhelming speed. At the quarter-mile mark, Skartel had extended its lead to 50 yards. The crowd was beginning to lose interest, many aliens turning to their companions to discuss how quickly the inevitable conclusion would arrive. But Maya noticed something that no one else had seen yet. Scartel's pace had dropped. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough for someone who understood the mechanics of sustained speed. The creature was magnificent, but it was built for hunting, not racing. It was designed to catch prey quickly, not to maintain maximum velocity for extended periods. Maya, on the other hand, was just getting started. As they approached the halfway point, something began to change. Maya's steady pace suddenly didn't look quite so casual. While Scartel's movement was starting to show the first subtle signs of stress, Maya looked exactly the same as she had at the starting line. Her stride was unchanged, her breathing remained controlled, and her speed was, if anything, beginning to increase. The lead began to shrink. 60 yards became 50, 50 became 40. The crowd noticed the change and began to pay attention again. This was not how a hunt was supposed to proceed. Scartel, sensing the shift, pushed harder. The creature's competitive instincts were as highly developed as its physical capabilities, and it refused to accept that any prey could possibly challenge its supremacy. But that extra effort came at a cost. The Velkhari's breathing became more labored, its movements slightly less fluid. Maya, meanwhile, had shifted into what felt like a higher gear. This was the moment she had trained for. The point in a race where human physiology truly began to show its unique advantages. Her body's cooling system was working perfectly, her cardiovascular system delivering oxygen with ruthless efficiency, her muscle fibers switching seamlessly between different energy systems. With a quarter-mile remaining, the lead was down to 20 yards. The arena had grown strangely quiet, as if the entire crowd was holding its breath. This was not just unprecedented, it was impossible according to everything they thought they knew about the limitations of human athletic ability. Scartel was no longer gliding across the track. The creature was working, its powerful frame showing the strain of maintaining a pace it had never been forced to sustain. Its amber eyes kept flicking back toward Maya. Confusion and something that might have been concern beginning to show in its predatory gaze. Maya could see the finish line ahead, and she could see victory. But more than that, she could feel something she had felt only a few times before in her life. That moment when the human body transcends its apparent limitations and becomes something more than the sum of its parts. The real race was just beginning. The impossible chase. The arena's silence was broken only by the rhythmic pounding of feet and claws against the track surface. What had begun as a routine demonstration of alien superiority had transformed into something that defied everything the galactic community thought they knew about human capabilities. Scartel's breathing had become audible even over the distance that separated the runners. The Velkhari's massive chest heaved with each stride, its scales glistening with the alien equivalent of perspiration. For the first time in its 43 hunt victories, the apex predator was experiencing something it had never encountered before: the possibility of defeat. Maya maintained her position 20 yards behind, but those watching closely could see that the gap was no longer widening. If anything, it was slowly, incrementally, impossibly beginning to close. Her form remained textbook perfect, her stride efficient and economical. While Scartel was fighting the track, Maya seemed to be flowing across it. In the observation booth reserved for race officials, Dr. Thexini stared at his instruments in disbelief. "This cannot be correct," he muttered to his assistant. A spider-like being named Clicktar, whose species specialized in mathematical precision. "Run the calculations again." Clicktar's 8 appendages worked furiously across the control surface, double and triple checking the sensor readings. "Doctor, the measurements are accurate. The human's pace has been consistent for the entire race distance, but that should be impossible. Our models show that maintaining such speed requires energy expenditure that would exceed human physiological limits." "Then our models are wrong," Dr. Thexini said quietly. "Or we have fundamentally misunderstood something about human biology." In the stands, the initial dismissive chatter had given way to intense observation. Species that had dismissed humans as physically inferior were now leaning forward in their seats, watching something that challenged their basic understanding of athletic performance. The Zephyrians, whose own running speed was considered impressive among galactic races, were no longer swaying in condescending amusement. Ambassador Krelon, the same being whose dismissive comments had motivated Maya to enter the hunt, found himself gripping the rail of his observation deck with all four hands. His assistant, a nervous creature named Piptel, kept glancing between his leader and the track below. "Sir," Piptel ventured carefully, "perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of human athletic potential." Krelon's response was a low growl that indicated deep thought rather than anger. "That creature down there is not following the rules of physics as we understand them. Look at the Velkari. Skartel is operating at maximum sustainable output exactly as predicted by our models. But the human appears to be accelerating." And indeed, Maya was accelerating. With 3/8 of a mile remaining, she had begun to tap into the deepest reserves of human endurance capability. This was the moment that separated good runners from great ones, the point where mental toughness became as important as physical conditioning. Her legs had found a rhythm that seemed to bypass conscious control, her body operating on the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of persistence hunting evolution. The gap continued to shrink. 15 yards, 12 yards, 10 yards. Skartel's head turned back toward Maya, and for the first time the spectators could see something unprecedented in those amber eyes: uncertainty. The creature's superior speed had always been its definitive advantage, the one factor that made victory inevitable. But that advantage was disappearing with every stride. Maya could sense the change in her opponent's movement patterns. Skartel's gait had lost its predatory grace and taken on the desperation of an animal that suddenly found itself being hunted rather than hunting. The Velkari was running harder than it had ever run before, but Maya could see the subtle signs of a system beginning to break down under stress. In contrast, Maya felt as though she was just hitting her stride. Her breathing remained controlled, her heart rate steady within the zone she had trained to maintain for hours at a time. This was what human beings were designed to do. Not to be the fastest over short distances, but to be relentlessly, impossibly consistent over long ones. The crowd began to stir as the impossible became undeniable. The gap was now 8 yards and still closing. Voices that had been raised in laughter and dismissal now carried notes of amazement and disbelief. Some species began to cheer, though whether for Maya or simply for the spectacle itself was unclear. "This is remarkable," came a voice from the arena's commentary booth. The speaker was Velnix, a renowned sports analyst whose species was known for their objectivity and precision. "In my 4 centuries of covering galactic athletics, I have never witnessed anything comparable to what we are seeing. The human is not just maintaining pace with the Velkari. She appears to be gaining ground while doing so." His co-commentator, a gaseous being named Wisptar, whose communication came through harmonic vibrations, added their own analysis. "The energy efficiency we are observing defies our standard models. The human's oxygen consumption appears stable, while Skartel's metabolic indicators suggest severe stress." Maya could hear fragments of the commentary through the arena's sound system, but her focus remained absolute. She had entered a state that runners sometimes called the zone. That perfect alignment of mind and body where conscious thought gave way to pure, efficient movement. This was the state that allowed humans to run down antelope on the African savanna, to cross continents on foot, to accomplish feats of endurance that seemed impossible to observers. 6 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards. Skartel's movements were becoming labored. The creature's powerful muscles, designed for explosive bursts of speed, were being asked to perform a task they had never evolved to handle. The Velkari was discovering the difference between being fast and being able to sustain that speed, a distinction that no previous hunt participant had been capable of exploiting. Maya, meanwhile, was experiencing something transcendent. Her body had found that perfect rhythm where effort and efficiency merged into something greater than either alone. She could feel her cardiovascular system working in perfect harmony, her cooling mechanisms preventing overheating, her muscle fibers accessing energy stores with precision timing. This was the human advantage that no other species had evolved. Not speed, not strength, but the ability to continue when continuing seemed impossible. 3 yards. 2 yards. The arena had erupted in noise unlike anything heard in the 300 years of hunt history. Beings were on their feet, tentacles raised, wings spread, vocalizing in ways that transcended species barriers. They were witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about the hierarchy of galactic athletic ability. Scartel made one final effort, calling upon reserves of strength that had never been tested before. The creature's speed increased marginally, its 6 legs working in desperate synchronization to maintain its lead. But Maya could see that this was unsustainable, a final burst that would either secure victory or guarantee collapse. Maya responded by doing something that seemed impossible, given her already incredible pace. She accelerated again. Her stride lengthened without losing frequency. Her form remained perfect even as her speed increased, and her breathing stayed controlled even as she pushed into territory that should have been beyond human capability. This was the moment when training, genetics, and pure human stubbornness combined into something approaching the miraculous. 1 yard. The finish line was visible ahead, marked by the same luminescent material that had started the race. Both runners were operating at their absolute limits, but in completely different ways. Scartel was burning through every available energy store in a desperate attempt to maintain dominance. Maya was tapping into the deepest wells of human endurance, accessing capabilities that her species had developed over millions of years of survival through persistence. They were neck and neck as the final 100 yards approached. The crowd's noise had reached levels that threatened the arena's structural integrity. This was no longer just a race. It was a collision between 2 completely different philosophies of speed and endurance. 2 different approaches to the fundamental question of how fast a living being could travel over distance. Scartel's eyes kept darting toward Maya, no longer with predatory confidence, but with growing desperation. The creature had never been pushed to this limit, had never been forced to question its own supremacy. This human, this supposedly inferior being, was matching it stride for stride in a display that rewrote everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth's children. Maya, for her part, felt a calm certainty settling over her. This was what she had come here to prove. Not that humans were the fastest species in the galaxy, but that speed alone was not the only measure of athletic supremacy. Humans brought something else to competition, something that could not be measured in simple velocity calculations. 50 yards from the finish line, Maya pulled even with Scartel for the first time since the race had begun. The visual of a human being running stride for stride with the galaxy's most feared predator sent shockwaves through the crowd. Species that had never even considered humans as athletes were now witnessing the impossible made manifest. Scartel's breathing had become ragged, its movements showing the first signs of real distress. The creature was learning what Maya had known from the beginning, that this race was not a sprint, but a test of sustained performance, and in that test, human physiology had advantages that no one had anticipated. 25 yards to go, and Maya could feel victory approaching. Not just her victory, but something larger, a vindication of human potential, a demonstration that the supposedly weak and limited children of Earth possessed capabilities that the galaxy had never suspected. But as they entered the final stretch, Scartel summoned something from deep within its predatory nature. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps instinct, perhaps simply the refusal to accept defeat. The Velkhari found one last reserve of speed, one final acceleration that carried it slightly ahead of Maya as they approached the line that would determine history. Maya saw the move and smiled. This was exactly what she had been waiting for. This was the moment when human endurance would meet alien desperation. When the science of persistence hunting would face the raw power of predatory instinct. The finish line rushed toward them both, and the galaxy held its breath. Victory beyond measure. Scartel's final surge carried the massive predator ahead by half a stride as the finish line loomed just 15 yards away. The creature's desperation was palpable, its entire being focused on maintaining the supremacy that had defined its existence for 43 consecutive victories. Every muscle fiber, every evolutionary advantage, every predatory instinct was channeled into those final seconds of competition. But Maya had been waiting for exactly this moment. She had studied countless hours of hunt footage, analyzing not just the Velkhari's capabilities, but their behavioral patterns under stress. She knew that when pushed beyond their normal hunting requirements, they would instinctively attempt one final, overwhelming burst of speed. It was a strategy that had never failed them because no previous opponent had possessed the endurance to remain competitive deep enough into a race to trigger this response. Maya was not like previous opponents. As Scartel pulled ahead, Maya did something that violated every principle of tactical racing known to galactic athletics. Instead of matching the Velkhari's acceleration immediately, she maintained her pace for 3 more strides. To observers, it appeared she had given up, that she was conceding defeat in the face of her opponent's superior final kick. They could not have been more wrong. Maya was counting. 1 stride, 2 strides, 3 strides. At exactly the moment when Scartel's burst would begin to cost more energy than it generated, when the creature's metabolism would shift from sustainable output to emergency reserves, Maya unleashed her own finishing strategy. What happened next redefined the limits of human athletic performance. Maya's acceleration was not the explosive burst that Scartel had produced. Instead, it was a smooth, almost seamless transition to a higher gear that seemed to emerge from reserves that should not have existed. Her stride lengthened while maintaining its frequency, her form remained perfect, even as her speed increased. And most impossibly, her breathing stayed controlled throughout the transition. This was the culmination of not just months of training, but millions of years of evolution. Maya had tapped into the deepest capabilities of human persistence hunting, accessing energy systems that other species had never developed. Her body was operating on the accumulated wisdom of ancestors who had run down mammoths and crossed continents on foot. The gap between the runners evaporated in the space of 5 strides. Maya pulled even with Scartel just 10 yards from the finish line, and the crowd's reaction was unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic athletics. Beings were vocalizing in frequencies that strained the arena's acoustic dampening systems. The noise was not just loud, it was transformative, the sound of fundamental assumptions being shattered in real time. Scartel's amber eyes went wide as Maya appeared in its peripheral vision. The creature had never experienced anything like this. In 43 previous hunts, its final acceleration had always been decisive, always overwhelming. But this human, this supposedly inferior being, had not just matched it, but seemed to be pulling ahead with an ease that defied comprehension. 5 yards from victory, Maya could see something in Scartel's movement that confirmed her strategy had worked perfectly. The Velkhari's final burst had come at enormous metabolic cost. The creature's breathing was now labored to the point of distress, its powerful legs showing the first tremors of muscle failure, its predatory grace replaced by the desperate scrambling of a system pushed beyond its design limits. Maya, in contrast, felt as though she could continue running at this pace for miles. Her cooling system was managing her core temperature perfectly. Her cardiovascular system was delivering oxygen with ruthless efficiency, and her mental state was one of calm focus rather than desperate exertion. This was what human beings had been designed to do, not to be fastest, but to be inexorably, impossibly persistent. 3 yards from the finish line, Maya pulled ahead by a full stride. The visual impact was staggering. For 300 years, no sentient being had ever led a Velkari in the final meters of a hunt. The psychological effect on the spectators was immediate and profound. Ambassador Krelon found himself gripping the rail of his observation deck so tightly that the metal began to deform under pressure from his 4 hands. The same being who had dismissed human children as moving like wounded prey animals was now watching one of those supposedly limited creatures about to achieve something that had been considered literally impossible. Dr. Thexini abandoned all pretense of scientific objectivity and was shouting at his instruments. "The readings must be wrong. No organism can sustain this level of performance. Check the sensors again." Kliktar's 8 appendages were working frantically across the control surface, but every calculation produced the same impossible result. "Doctor, all systems are functioning normally. The human's metabolic efficiency is beyond our theoretical models." In the commentary booth, Velnix had given up any attempt at professional composure. His usually measured tones had been replaced by something approaching awe. "This is unprecedented in galactic athletic history. The human is not just competing with a Velkari, she is defeating one." 2 yards from the finish line, Skartel made one final desperate lunge forward. It was not a strategic move, but an instinctive one, the last effort of a predator that could not psychologically accept defeat. The creature threw its entire body toward the luminescent finish line in a display that was both magnificent and heartbreaking. Maya saw the move and responded with something that crystallized everything unique about human athletic philosophy. Instead of lunging in response, instead of abandoning her form for a desperate scramble, she simply maintained her perfect stride and trusted in her superior sustained speed. This was the difference between sprinting and running, between explosive power and persistent excellence. She crossed the finish line a full stride ahead of Skartel. For exactly 3 seconds, the arena was completely silent. 50,000 beings from dozens of species stood motionless, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The hunt of Kethvar, the most sacred and predictable athletic tradition in galactic civilization, had just been won by a human child. Then the noise began. It started as a rumble from the lower sections and built into a crescendo that threatened to damage the arena's structural systems. Beings were on their feet, vocalizing in ways that transcended species barriers. Some were cheering, some were shouting in languages that the translation systems could not process, and others were simply making noise as a way to release the psychological pressure of having witnessed the impossible. Maya crossed the finish line and gradually slowed to a stop, her hands on her hips as she caught her breath. Her form remained perfect, even in recovery, her cooling system managing the transition from race pace to rest with typical human efficiency. She looked back at Skartel, who had collapsed to the track surface, sides heaving with exhaustion and eyes wide with something that might have been respect. She walked back to where the great predator lay and knelt beside it. In careful, respectful tones, she spoke in the basic galactic language she had been studying for months. "You are magnificent, Skartel. You pushed me to run faster than I ever have before. Thank you for the honor of competing with you." The Velkari's amber eyes focused on her with difficulty. When it spoke, its voice was barely above a whisper, but the arena's sensors picked up every word. How did you know?" Maya smiled, the same quiet, confident expression she had shown in the preparation chamber. Because humans don't hunt by being faster than our prey. We hunt by being more stubborn. Ambassador Veltar descended to the arena floor, his four arms moving in what his species considered gestures of profound respect. When he spoke, his voice carried across the arena with formal gravity. Citizens of the galaxy, we have witnessed something that will be remembered as long as intelligent life exists in this universe. Maya Chen of Earth has become the first sentient being to defeat a Velkari in the sacred hunt of Kethvar. The crowd's response threatened to overwhelm the arena's acoustic systems once again. In the observation booths, scientists were frantically recalculating everything they thought they knew about human physiology. Sports analysts were trying to find words for something that had no precedent in galactic athletic history. But perhaps the most significant reaction came from Ambassador Krelon, the being who had sparked Maya's participation with his dismissive comments about human athletic ability, slowly descended from his observation deck to the arena floor. His approach was formal, respectful, and tinged with something that looked very much like shame. "Miss Chen," he said when he reached her, his four arms positioned in a gesture of deep apology. "I must ask your forgiveness for my ignorant and insulting comments about your species' athletic capabilities. I clearly understood nothing about human potential." Maya looked up at him with that same calm expression that had characterized her throughout the entire experience. "Ambassador, you gave me exactly the motivation I needed to be here today. If anything, I should thank you." "But how?" Krelon asked, echoing Skartel's earlier question. "Our models, our calculations, everything we thought we knew about athletic performance. How did you do something that should have been impossible?" Maya stood and gestured toward the track where she had just rewritten galactic athletic history. "Your models assume that athletic performance is about maximum capability, the fastest possible speed, the highest possible jump, the strongest possible lift. But humans evolved differently. We evolved to be optimal rather than maximal. We can't run as fast as Skartel can for short distances, but we can run almost as fast for very long distances." She paused and looked around at the crowd of aliens, many of whom were still staring at her in disbelief. "On Earth, we have a saying. It's not about how fast you can go. It's about how fast you can go when you're tired. Today I got to show the galaxy what that means." Dr. Thexini approached with his measurement instruments, still shaking his head in scientific bewilderment. "Miss Chen, your performance today will require us to completely revise our understanding of human physiology. With your permission, we would like to conduct detailed studies of your athletic capabilities." Maya nodded graciously. "Of course, Doctor. But I think you'll find that I'm not particularly special among human athletes. What you saw today is representative of human endurance capability in general. We're all like this." The implications of that statement rippled through the crowd of observers. If Maya was correct, if her performance was not an anomaly but representative of human athletic potential, then everything the galactic community thought they knew about Earth's children would need to be reconsidered. As the arena slowly began to empty, beings departing with minds full of new questions about human capability, Maya walked back to where Skartel was slowly recovering from its unprecedented defeat. The great predator had managed to regain its feet, though its breathing was still labored. "Skartel," Maya said gently, "will you be all right?" The Velkari's amber eyes met hers, and when it spoke, there was something like admiration in its voice. "I will recover, small human, but I will never forget this day. You have taught me that there are different kinds of strength, different kinds of speed." Maya smiled and reached out carefully to touch the creature's scaled hide. "Maybe next time we meet, we can run together instead of racing against each other." I think we could learn a lot from each other." As she walked toward the exit, Maya was surrounded by reporters, scientists, and officials, all clamoring for interviews and explanations. But her mind was already moving beyond this single victory. Today had been about proving that humans belonged in galactic athletics. Tomorrow would be about showing what humanity could achieve when the galaxy truly understood their potential. The hunt of Kethvar was over, but Maya suspected that something much larger was just beginning. As she left the arena, she could hear the continuing discussions in dozens of languages, all centered around the same impossible fact. A human child had just outrun the galaxy's fastest predator, and she had done it not by becoming something she wasn't, but by being exactly what humans had always been: persistent, stubborn, and absolutely unwilling to quit when the goal still lay ahead. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again.